This is a video response and analysis of the video Capitalism's Massive Death Toll by a YouTube user called Democratic Socialist 01. It focuses a lot on the claims that 100 million people were killed by communism, as if just because a claim is dubious, it doesn't mean that the ideology of communism is less bad just because it didn't. Instead of 100, it killed 50 million. Okay, it doesn't matter if there are people accusing Hitler of having killed 1 billion people. It doesn't mean that Hitler is any as bad just because he actually killed like 20 million or 5 billion or. So it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. So you're wasting your time doing that, and I'm going to show by analyzing your video that your other claims against so-called capitalism are pretty much useless, and I'd say that. Overall, the video is pretty bad. It doesn't give us any argument in favor of Marxism. Largely because there are no arguments in favor of Marxism. All the Marxists have left to say that capitalism is imperfect, or capitalism causes imperfection, or capitalism doesn't solve every problem in the world, or capitalism hasn't lifted every single human being from poverty, even though poverty levels today are vastly less than they were before capitalism, industrial capitalism came along. And capitalist society, especially advanced, freer capitalist industrial societies, tend to be freer, more democratic, and far more prosperous than anything else especially anything that Marxism produced. So, just another example. This video is a good example of how Marxists fail to even defend their own system. Because you can't defend it. All you have to say is capitalism is imperfect, and you expect the viewer to thereby assume that Marxism, being against capitalism, therefore must be somewhat better. If we just try it again, let's try it one more time, because the Soviet Union and China and Eastern Germany and Romania and Albania and Cuba and North Korea and Vietnam and Laos and Mongolia. Those are not actually Marxists, okay? They were distorting. They were distorted forms of Marxism. They didn't count. We have to try again, because this time it's going to be democratic socialism. But democratic socialism doesn't exist because in order to expropriate everything from everybody in a society and make it in theory belong to the people, but in practice belong to the government, making the government the only capitalist in the society, that presupposes that the government should have unlimited powers. So you can't expropriate everything and still give the expropriated former owners the right to defend themselves. And once that expropriation is performed, the government, especially the only party left in the country, the Communist Party, which has all political power, also becomes the only capitalist in that economy. That's why Marxism creates the opposite of what it claims. It creates a complete concentration of wealth and political power into the hands of a single, not only entity, not only the Communist Party becomes the only capitalist in a society, it's usually a single person. And name me one Marxist regime that hasn't resulted into one single man, never a woman, always a man, to become the eternal leader of the country, the lifelong owner, CEO, and pharaoh of his respective society. So Marxism ends up in practice being equivalent to a scam to privatize an entire society into the hands of a single tyrant, a single CEO, king, monolithic, unchallengeable, a tycoon that turns the entire country into his own private little farm, into his own private little Belgian Congo, as you're gonna show in the video later. In the video, show the example of the Belgian Congo. Every attempt to create a Marxist socialist society ended up creating a Belgian Congo. So that's an entire country reduced to the status of a private property of a single individual, be it Mao, be it Stalin, be it Pol Pot, be it Erich Honecker, Ceausescu, Enver Hoxha, Joseph Tito, Zhivkov in Bulgaria. Zhivkov were actually the longest reigning, the communist leader of Bulgaria, was the longest reigning person in the 20th century of any country. He was in power for like 45 years or something. So here begins my review of that specific video.
Your thesis. How many millions of people have to die before you might admit that you're wrong? Well, obviously more than 100 million, because that's the approximate total. That's probably an underestimate, but we'll be conservative, because adding another 10 million doesn't really make that much difference.
Notice how these writers treat the 100 million death figure like it is a historical fact. Peterson, without a shred of evidence, was even willing to increase the death toll in order to strengthen his point. This alone should tell you that these people don't care about historical facts, just political point scoring.
Well, the death toll of Marxist regimes is debatable, but it is in the millions, of course. They were very oppressive regimes, and it's not only about the sheer number of people who died, like using body counts as an argument. So it could have been 20 million, 200 million. It's not as much about the exact figure as about the overall result. I mean, there were millions of people who died, or millions of people was off who actually lived, but lived in extremely oppressive systems. And for what? I mean, did these Marxist regimes actually provide these societies with a democracy, with the prosperity that Marxism promised? Because if you don't forget that Marxism actually promised a far more abundant society than what he called capitalism. There will be more abundance, there will be less poverty, there will be more products, there will be more food, there will be more housing, there will be more sophisticated infrastructure. And that's not what happened, because modern Marxists, they have downgraded their claims to saying that there would be, what's the point of so much consumerism? If people just have enough, that'll be good. If people just have a modest house, some food, some healthcare, some education, that's it. But that's not what Marxism was about. Marxism was about more prosperity than capitalism. But it was, of course, industrial capitalism in liberal democracies that gave provided societies with the most abundant level of consumption, and also with the most democratic freedoms of all. So exactly, even if only 2 million people had died from Marxist regimes, it's still the Marxist claims would be false, and it would have been clearly a very pretty much inferior system to liberal democracies and capitalism. And well, let's go on. Just a note here: have this pretty manipulative and absurd cartoon here showing a starving child from appears to be one of those famines in Africa, begging for some water to a capitalist, to an adult. And well, if you actually do research, you see that at least the Ethiopian famine of the 1980s that produced these images, as well as Somalian crisis later, especially the Ethiopian crisis of famine in the 1980s, were caused by, happened in Ethiopia because when Ethiopia was under a Marxist regime. Okay, the Derg, DERG, was the Marxist Communist Party that ruled Ethiopia in the 1980s until the early 90s. So, in capitalism, well, capitalism is the economy in general. So, all economies have to be capitalistic. Marxism is just a scam to con people into giving all power to one capitalist and concentrating all wealth in the hand of one capitalist only. The capitalist, being the Communist Party, would be in that case the only capitalist. There's no such system where a starving child would have to pay for water, because if water requires human labor, in any case it has to be paid by somebody. But it doesn't mean in capitalism that you are forbidden from giving the extremely poor, especially poor children who cannot work, from giving the resources to them for free out of charity. Because if you don't do charity, you do it through the government, through taxes, which is mandatory, and ends up feeding in a bureaucracy that ends up creating even more poverty than the poverty they were created to solve. So it doesn't solve anything. Statist socialism doesn't solve anything, it makes it worse.
Many times over. Now, before we discuss the deaths caused by capitalism, we must define what capitalism is. Capitalism is an economic system that is based on the private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit. It is characterized by wage labor or forced labor, if they can get away with it, producing for the purposes of selling.
Well, forced labor was widely practiced in the Soviet Union, in Eastern Europe, and in socialist China. So, if you do capitalism, may be characterized by the existence of some forced labor and slavery in some cases. The socialist regimes are far from being actually. Forced labor and slavery were more present in socialist regimes than in capitalist regimes on average.
AKA, come on, quote Smith directly. The rich consume little more than the poor, and in spite of their natural selfishness and rapacity, they divide with the poor the produce of all their improvements. They are led by an invisible hand to make nearly the same distribution of the necessaries of life which would have been made had the earth been divided into equal portions among all its inhabitants, and thus, without intending it, without knowing it, advance the interests of the society and afford means to the multiplication of the species. Now, whilst one could argue that people acting in their self-interest could create incentives and promote innovation, it is hard to deny that this mindset has also caused the death of millions in both the 19th and 20th centuries. In fact,
once again, so those images of starving people are from, I don't know where they are from specifically, but those that were produced recently, the extreme poverty of Africa. Most of Africa was under socialist regimes or any other statist regimes. It could have been right-wing statists or left-wing statists, but in any case, there were regimes that were strongly opposed to free markets. India, for example, is a great example of a country that fought violently against free enterprise. In India, you had to have a license to open a business. The government would dictate your profit margin. The government would dictate what product you had to produce, how many items, how many units you could produce. If you hired any workers, you couldn't fire them for almost any reason. So once again, as I said, Ethiopia was under a communist regime when it had its famine in the 1980s. So what's your point? So most of these famines were produced by anti-capitalist, anti-free market regimes, and even if they weren't, that still wouldn't mean anything, because socialism was tried. It produced the death by starvation of millions of people. doesn't matter exactly how many. It created extremely oppressive regimes that were controlled political and the cultural life and the press and the educational system in a totalitarian fashion, and produced at most a disequality of poverty, where a small elite that belonged to the upper cadres of the Communist Party enjoyed the benesses of life, usually having access to sophisticated imported products, while most of the population lived in housing projects and had to go to stand in line for hours every day to get maybe a small loaf of bread, and had no access to beef or anything like that. So socialism still stinks.
Capitalists pursuing their own interests has led to a great misallocation of resources, exploitation, and of course, mass death. Furthermore, capitalists have also shown no hesitation using the power of the state to crush those who are a threat to their economic interests, whether the threat comes from Marxists, trade unions, indigenous people, or even landless peasants. So how should we calculate the death toll of capitalism? Well, it is clear that we will never have an exact number, but we can certainly say that it runs well into the hundreds of millions. German academic Thomas Pogge estimates that in the 15 years after the Cold War, 270 million, 18 million a year, perished due to terrible poverty. This includes those who have died from poor sanitation, starvation, and the lack of medical care. Now, why is that the fault of capitalism? Well, we live in the era of neoliberalism, where the world is one large market, so capitalism is completely global. Big capitalist multinationals dominate the world economy, and capital easily flows across national borders. Furthermore, modern industry, controlled by capitalists, produce more than enough food and other essential goods to completely end world hunger and poverty. Yet this does not happen. Why? Because under capitalism, the world's impoverished citizens are not seen as people who need desperate help, but rather as unpaying customers who cannot afford goods and services. After all, it is in the capitalist's self-interest to derive profits from.
And how to solve that? I mean, if people can't pay for something, who's going to pay those that produce all the food for these people? There is no way to do it. If you charge taxes from the rich and from the middle class, you're diverting resources that otherwise would have gone to productive workers, and therefore you create some more poverty where there wasn't before. So you create poverty in one place and solve poverty in another. That doesn't happen. That doesn't work. Poverty exists today mostly in Africa and Southern Asia. Extreme poverty because of essentially because of Marxism. Those areas of the world that were and still are governed by either dictators without ideology that just want more raw power in some cases, but in many cases where there is an ideology present, it isn't the ideology of economic freedom. It is the ideology of massive state intervention in the economy. India until the early 90s was essentially a statist society where you couldn't produce anything that you wanted by free enterprise. You had to have a license from the government, and you have to have your profit margins were dictated, your prices were dictated by the government, by bureaucrats. So that slowed down the reduction of poverty levels in the world by massive amounts. The same goes for Latin America, even though Latin America has a far less pronounced level of poverty. Most Latin American nations, at the behest, at the advice of Marxist ideologues, have closed their economies and imposed a massive tax burden on their citizens, and they have all sorts of still, especially until the early 90s, but today they still have a massive amount of government intervention in the economy. Firing workers is illegal. In Brazil, you have to pay to the government as a social security tax, almost as much as you pay to the employee himself, in terms of monetary amount. For example, for every $1,000 you pay to an employee, you have to pay the government about $900 in taxes for hiring people. That's as an excuse to foster social security. Between 1964 and 1991, imported consumer products was simply illegal in Brazil. You couldn't import anything. That's when we had the so-called right-wing dictatorship. Now, our dictatorship in Brazil that we had in the 60s and 70s was a left-wing dictatorship, economically at least. The same goes for every Latin American regime. All Latin America was governed by left-wing military dictatorships that persecuted the Marxists, but they themselves practiced a lighter form of Marxism. Promoted by the United Nations, by the United Nations Latin American Committee, by Raul Prebisch, that indicated that the developing countries had to close their borders, had to regulate their markets, had to create all sorts of impediments to capital, to give to the workers a huge amount of rights, right to massive amount of like vacation a year, to all sorts of free everything, free healthcare, free education. The result is that Latin America couldn't advance because you can't have rights over something that is a result of labor. You can't have rights to health. You can't have free healthcare because otherwise that would imply that the healthcare personnel, the doctors and nurses, would have been your slaves. Because you can't have right to somebody else's labor. Labor has to be spontaneous, has to be compensated. So if somebody works, they have to get to be paid for it. If they're not getting paid for it, it's slavery. That's why socialism is slavery. You can't force people to work as teachers or doctors just because the population, that there's a law saying that the population has free healthcare and free education. Nothing is free. Socialism is a scam to con the stupid people into giving government and therefore the richest wealth of part of society unfair advantages over the poor. That's why socialism creates social inequality, and capitalism usually tends to solve it better. It's far from perfect, but it tends to solve unfair inequality in a society far more efficiently than socialism, which never works. There are only two types of systems on the planet. Not only for the economy, but for everything. There are systems that sometimes work and sometimes don't work, depending on how well regulated they're implemented. That's the case of liberal capitalism, as well as the liberal democracy that we have based on the American system. There are systems that never work. Marxist socialism is one such system. It never produces the results that it pretends to produce, that it purports to produce. It always creates a massive concentration of economic power into the hands of one entity, the Communist Party. The Communist Party becomes the only capitalist in that society, and therefore becomes an ultra-oppressive entity.
The assets, using their great economic power to help the desperately poor, would be completely unprofitable. Now, this mindset has always prevailed under capitalism, especially in the 19th century, which is when capitalism really became dominant. For example, during the Irish potato famine of the 1840s and 50s, British landlords continued to export food for a profit rather than feed the starving Irish. Now, why would they do this? Because exporting food was far more profitable than helping penniless Irish peasants and workers up.
You see, that's a lie. The Irish potato famine was caused by the British government, who withheld food from the Irish because they thought that the Irish were an inferior people, and they wanted they didn't want to help the Irish. They wanted the poor people of Ireland to die. So the Irish potato famine was government intervention in the economy, not free market.
After all, it is in the capitalists' self-interest to sell their produce at the best price they can get. Now, as I said, in the imperial age, this economic behavior by capitalists was pretty typical. Capitalists who were backed by colonial governments would use the indigenous people of the conquered territories as a source of cheap labor. When the products were ready, the capitalists would then export the goods in order to sell them on more lucrative markets. This often, like in the Irish example, resulted in famine and mass death. To give another example, in the man-made famines of British India, more than enough food was being produced to feed the Indian population. However, both the landlords and the British government preferred to sell these goods on the world market, where they would receive a much greater profit. So in British India, you had a situation where tons of food was being exported, whilst millions of Indians, those who had harvested the grain, were starving on the streets. Now, according to Mike Davis, author of Late Victorian Holocausts, El Nino Famines, and the Making of the Third World, between 12 and 29 million Indians starved to death between 1876 and 1902. Now, when we talk about the mass exploitation and the pursuit of profit in the 19th century, it is impossible to ignore the Congo Free State, which was not controlled by the Belgian government, but by a single capitalist, Leopold II. In that nation,
That's exactly what socialism, what Marxism causes. Marxism causes any society to become the Belgian Congo. The Soviet Union was nothing but the Belgian Congo of the Communist Party. The China of the 1960s and 70s was nothing but the Belgian Congo of the Communist Party. So Marxism produces Belgian Congos. Marxism causes a society to become the Belgian Congo of King Leopold, the Communist Party.
the entire population was put to work extracting rubber and ivory for the benefit of one man. Now, whilst
Just like the Soviet Union and China existed for the purpose of only one man. Stalin, Mao, Ceausescu in Romania, Enver Hoxha in Albania, Erich Honecker in East Germany. Marxism always creates a society where there's only one man. It's always a man, never a woman, by the way. It's always a man from the majority of the country, never a minority. The closest thing to a minority that ruled the communist country was Stalin, was a Georgian, not a Russian, but always a man. And all of society Marxism causes the leader of the Communist Party to become the King Leopold of his country. One guy that has a property the size of the country itself, and everybody who lives inside a Marxist society is the private property of the leader of the Communist Party. That's the same thing.
Leopold II became one of the richest men in the world by selling Congo's natural resources in the world market. The people who were actually extracting these resources were being killed, tortured, and starved to death. In fact, it is estimated that up to 10 million Congolese were killed during Leopold's reign of terror. Now, my critics would suggest that I am simply attributing the deaths caused by colonialism to capitalism. Well, according to Cecil Rhodes, a capitalist and imperialist, one of the motivations of imperial conquest was about securing new markets. To quote Rhodes, in order to save 40 million inhabitants in the United Kingdom from bloody civil war, our statesmen must acquire new lands for settling the surplus population of this country, to provide new markets for the goods produced in the factories and mines. The empire, as I have always said, is a bread and butter question. If you want to avoid civil war, you must become imperialist.
So you're criticizing capitalism and using statist arguments that the government should do that, that therefore what the government does is bad. Is that what you're saying? Or statesmen of Britain have to acquire new land? That's statism. That's not free market capitalism. That is a government intervention in the society.
British politician and businessman Joseph Chamberlain, Secretary of State for the Colonies, also shared this view. In a speech in 1893, Chamberlain attacked anti-imperialists as Little Englanders who were against opening up fresh markets for British commerce. To quote him directly, if the Little Englanders had their way, not only would they refrain from taking the legitimate opportunities which offer for extending the empire and for securing for us new markets, but I doubt whether they would even take the pains which are necessary to preserve the great heritage which has come down to us from our ancestors. Yes, according to Chamberlain and Rhodes, one of the primary motivations for imperialism was to secure new markets where British capitalists would be able to sell their products, as well as exploit cheap labour. So in the 19th century, capitalism was largely spread through the barrel of a gun. Take the Opium Wars. In the 1830s, British and other European traders had flooded the Chinese black market with opium, a drug that had been banned in China since 1799. In 1839, the Chinese government responded by confiscating 20 chests of opium from British ships and refused to compensate the British traders who had been flouting Chinese law for decades. The British responded by attacking the Chinese, which started the First Opium War. The British won the war in 1842 and forced the Chinese to sign the Treaty of Nanking, which ceded Hong Kong to the British Empire, as well as forcing China to open up several ports to British traders. Now when the British and
So, okay, countries invade countries. It's statism, that's not free markets. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. The Soviet Union invaded all of Eastern Europe and imposed socialism on them. So the absence of free market capitalism certainly doesn't prevent imperialism from happening. Okay, what's your point? So what's all this bullshit for? What you're trying to say? I mean, your system, socialism, caused imperialism as well. Imperialism was present in the Soviet Union. Soviet Union was a highly imperialistic country, and so what? It doesn't change anything. The absence of capitalism would not, would not prevent more advanced, more powerful societies from conquering less advanced, weaker societies. So history proves it abundantly. Who cares about the Opium War? That's gibberish. It's diversion. You have no arguments. You have absolutely nothing to support your theory. So what you're using is diversion to deceive people into thinking that they have an argument there, but there isn't. You're just pointing stuff out that doesn't support socialism or Marxism in any sense.
other Western powers won the Second Opium War, which occurred between 1856 and 1860. They forced China, in accordance with the Convention of Peking, to legalize the opium trade and open more ports to Western traders. Now, why would the British and other Western powers want to legalize the opium trade? Because opium was addictive, which meant that there would always be willing customers. Of course, the result was that by 1900, 90 million Chinese were addicted to opium. So the evidence is pretty conclusive about capitalism's very close relationship with murderous and exploitive imperialism in the 19th century. Seeking markets so that merchants and capitalists could profit was very important to the imperialist powers in that era. In fact, it was even important in the 20th century. For example,
50s, the Guatemalans dared to challenge an American business that controlled much of its economy. The United Fruit Company of Boston owned 500,000 acres of land, the railroad, the port, and telecommunications. But most Guatemalan peasants found it difficult to survive.
So those people were wealthier before. They were better off before the United Fruit Company came along, probably supported by the United States government, taking away the economic freedom from the local population. So that's an argument against statism, right? Once again, you're making arguments against statism, not against free markets.
In 1950, Jacobo Arbenz was voted president. He wasn't a communist, but some of his close allies were. A former military man, Arbenz sought to modernize Guatemala's backward society. Washington was alarmed. President Arbenz started a land reform program, buying up fallow land to distribute to peasants. In compensation, he offered the landowners the values they had themselves declared for taxes. United Fruit was offered just over $1 million for its land. When Arbenz declared nationalization, the company, backed by the United States, claimed $16 million.
You've no less a figure than John Foster Dulles, head of the State Department, who was part of the firm of lawyers acting for the United Fruit Company. His brother Alan was the head of the CIA.
Y que no les costó
So it didn't take much of an effort on their part to persuade their president, a military man, Mr. Eisenhower, to give them the green light to overthrow Arbenzi's government.
Now you see this repeated throughout the history of the 20th century. Iran in 1953, the Suez Crisis in 1956, Brazil in 1964, Chile in 1973, and so on. Furthermore, almost the exact same type of exploitation that occurred in the 19th century still goes on today.
So the exploitation also went on by the Soviet Union in Eastern Europe, by the Soviet Union invading Afghanistan, by the Soviet Union funding political parties throughout Africa, throughout Latin America, throughout Asia, North Korea. It's still going on today with China supporting North Korea, splitting the Korean Peninsula into two countries, one which is one of the most modern, free societies, most successful societies in the world, which is South Korea, capitalist of course, and the other one which is one of the worst, most oppressive societies on earth, North Korea, supported by the Chinese Communist Party. So what's your point? Socialism doesn't change anything. Socialism doesn't make imperialism, doesn't make stronger countries stop meddling in the affairs of poorer countries. That's a fact of life. It is not changed by turning society into the Belgian Congo of the Communist Party.
For example, why do you think capitalists often set up shop in third world countries? Do they do this because the workers in Western countries are inferior to those in the third world? Of course not. The reason why they choose to have their goods manufactured in third world countries like Bangladesh is because it is far cheaper. In the countries they choose to manufacture their products in, pay is very poor and regulations are lax. Of course, this results in incidents like the Rana Plaza collapse.
Bangladesh is a country where you have to have a government license to do everything. The government will dictate your profit margins, the government will dictate everything about your business. That's why there's no economic freedom, and that's why the rich exploit the poor. Because they, in the middle class and the poor, they can't open a business in Bangladesh. You have to be a millionaire to deal with all the government bureaucracy that prevents free markets, free economic flow to occur in Bangladesh. So the problem in Bangladesh is not capitalism, it's the government over-regulating the economy. Those sweatshops, they are not unregulated. They are created by government regulation, by brutal levels of government regulation.
Which killed over 1,000 people because the owner had bypassed building regulations. The factories in the plaza, of course, were manufacturing clothes for some of the world's leading brands. So the problems with capitalism in the 19th century are still around in the 21st. Now why is this the case? Is it because capitalists are naturally evil? The answer is no. It is the system that is the problem. The capitalists must stay in business, and one of the ways to do so is to find the cheapest labor source possible and to sell their commodities at the best price they possibly can. They must have an edge over their competitors or be forced out of the market. The system forces people to act unethically. For example, it wouldn't take a genius to figure out who would win between a capitalist who decided to feed the world's starving citizens or a capitalist who sold his goods at high prices to wealthy customers.
So the absence of that system would imply that that behavior would disappear, right? So why did Stalin commanded 6 million Ukrainians to death by starvation in the 1930s, in the Holodomor? What force was at stake there? Why didn't socialism prevent such absurdity? Why didn't socialism, the absence of free market capitalist forces in your theory, why didn't the absence of capitalism prevent Mao Zedong from condemning Chinese to mass starvation during the Great Leap Forward, which was probably the worst economic disaster in all of human history? While capitalism may be problematic, most of the examples that you've shown are examples of state intervention into the economy, not capitalism flowing free from government intervention. And almost all of the examples that you've shown show disasters that happen even at worse scales, at greater scales, under socialist, Marxist regimes in China, in Eastern Europe, in the Soviet Union, in Vietnam, North Korea. None of these systems prevented any of those disasters: imperialism, the mass starvation of much of the population, massive amount of oppression. None of that was prevented by socialism. None of that was prevented by the absence of private property and the pursuit of profit. So you fail miserably. In your video, you fail miserably at making any point whatsoever in favor of Marxist socialism. I'm sorry.
The capitalist feeding the poor would go out of business, whilst the capitalist following the profit motive would be rewarded by becoming even richer. Therefore, a system based on the pursuit of profit and private wealth accumulation cannot be ethical. In fact, it leads to a world where 8 people have as much wealth as 50% of the world's population. So,
And that concentration of wealth is at least 80-90% caused by government regulation, which fosters the concentration of wealth into the hands of corporations. Corporations wouldn't even exist if governments weren't so big, especially the United States government, the European Union. They end up creating corporations by regulating the market in favor of the rich, who can pay for the vote of government representatives, who can pay for the interests of bureaucrats, who can pay for government regulation, while the average capitalist, the guys who own a business, a corner store or some small retail and small industries, those guys, they get sucked up by big capitalism because of government intervention, not because of free markets.
it should not surprise people that this system has killed hundreds of millions of people throughout its long history. It is undemocratic, exploitative, and murderous.
So it's undemocratic. So what is this, the Marxist regime that was more democratic than, say, the United States or Britain or France or many other capitalist systems that more recently have become democratic, such as Germany, Italy, Spain, Sweden, Brazil, Argentina, Japan, South Korea, Australia? What Marxist regime provided a greater level of democracy than those systems? Of course, capitalism can exist under dictatorships. That's because capitalism is the economy. There is no economy without capitalism. North Korea is a capitalist economy. The only difference is that capitalism in North Korea is entirely in the hands of one single capitalist, the Communist Party. That Kim Jong-il, whatever his name is, he is the owner of the country. He is the CEO of the country. He is the King Leopold of his Belgian Congo, his private property. North Korea is his little farm, and that's what Marxism creates. Marxism makes countries into the private property of the leader of the Communist Party. That's the only thing that Marxism has ever brought to society, to humankind, is the privatization of everything into the hands of one tiny, ridiculous, mediocre, obtuse, oppressive, retarded little leader. That's what your ideology creates. Nothing but that. There's no benefit to any Marxist society that that hasn't been obtained in capitalist societies far better and without the oppression and the death toll of socialism. So socialism in its Marxist form, as attempted in the 20th century and even surviving today, has only caused a greater concentration of wealth and power into the hands of one super King Leopold, one super dictator who becomes the only capitalist tycoon, CEO of his own private farm, his own private Belgian Congo, and can do whatever he wants with it and only gets out of power when he dies. That's what Marxism gave to humanity. So your ideology, I'm sorry, it's a dismal failure. It stinks, and you should be profoundly ashamed of yourself for claiming otherwise. You didn't even claim, because you're not. There are no arguments in favor of Marxism. Your entire video has absolutely no arguments in favor of anything that Marxist societies brought to humanity, because there would be nothing to show. Okay, that's why your video is such a negative contribution to humanity. I'm sorry, it's a disaster.